Hello.
Well, good evening, Graham, and welcome. I should
Hello,
just say
Charles.
that Celestine and I did actually eventually get to see the Martin Creed exhibition.
Oh, yeah, what do you think?
Well, you didn't warn me about the vomiting one.
I don't remember the vomiting one. What happens with the vomiting one?
So that's in right. So it's a sequence of four video
Oh,
screens,
yeah. Yeah.
and it's the sound of retching by four different people.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's trying to prove that you can make art out of anything coming out of you, and in this case, vomit.
So it's not really not a show to see with a hangover then.
Probably not, and indeed not a show to see if you have a problem with reacting to people vomiting. And there is a condition. I'm not sure what it's called. Might be worth looking up actually.
Ah,
You know what that is. But I mean, so this now I've had a considerable debate about it as to whether he's taking the mick really with his art, and he's just proving
yeah.
that anything can be art.
Yeah, but the thing about the young British artist movement of the 1990s, which he was
Mm,
like at the tail end of,
he
is they
was.
all had a sense of humor. They all knew they were being a bit ridiculous a lot of time, and that was
Oof.
part of the thing. That's part of the reason they were successful in pop because they did have a sense of humor. So yeah, I reckon he knows that he's been a bit funny.
I mean, you're right. There is definitely humour there, and I did like the "Don't Worry" one a lot. The yellow "Don't Worry."
Did you like the balls?
Ah, well, it's fair to say it's a load of balls. And I guess what's interesting with that is that that configuration of balls can vary from each time it's put together on the floor. It's not like he's going to deliberately put them all in the same space. On the other
I
hand,
know.
it
Yeah,
was like a kinder. It,
I talked to a curator who was putting it
mm,
together the day before
yeah.
it opened, and they were placing the balls in deliberate spaces. There, it wasn't just
No,
random. Yeah, yeah.
really.
Yeah.
That bang goes my theory that it's just like a children's kindergarten. Then, um,
Mm-mm.
at the end of the day, where all the children are told put everything back together in the box, put everything in the box. So up and down reaction to it, really. But I mean, that is the point with it. It is deliberately provocative. That's what it's meant to
Yeah,
be.
but it's also entertaining. It's definitely
Of course,
entertaining.
it is. If you get a piece of scrunched up paper and you put it in a glass cabinet and call it art, well,
Mm.
who's to say it's not?
Well,
But
he's
pardon
actually donated
Celestine,
that art. That piece of art is donated to the Mercer Gallery in Harrogate, by the way.
that particular piece.
Yeah. As a thank you for putting the exhibition on.
That piece is a thank you.
Well, yeah, it's worth quite a lot of money, Charles. So it's
Well, I
not.
don't doubt
It
that for
looks
me,
it
but
looks
yeah.
insubstantial, but it's not
Mm.
insubstantial as a gift.
I mean, I'm pleased that I went to it, Graham. Don't get me wrong, and it is humorous, and it is interesting to see just what anti-art can qualify as art, and that's what it does. Strangely enough, did you watch the video where he's being filmed and he is
Yeah.
wearing his suit covered in paint, and I did think that maybe the most artistic piece of all was himself as a piece of art.
Mm. Well, yeah, I generally, I generally think that great fine art and great pop art and great street art and physical things in general are better than conceptual art. And some conceptual art's really good, but it really depends on how strong the idea is. And quite often, a lot of video art is basically so abstract and obtuse
Mm.
as to achieve very little whatsoever.
I mean, a lot of this art required the explanation, so it was concept that was important, as much
Mm.
as what you were looking at. That it required all the apart from "Don't Worry," which I don't think required any explanation. That was just something that plays on your mind in a and you don't worry, and that's a good reaction. And I'm sure other people tried to film themselves underneath "Don't Worry," and we'll put it somewhere. Um,
Mm.
but there are others that where the explanation is rather more important than in some ways than the piece of art, or indeed one's own interpretation of it before reading the pieces of art. So, for example, the black and white on the wall, which apparently is to influence the way that you look at a gallery wall in a different way because suddenly had some black lines painted on it, which changes your perspective. Do you go along with that?
No, it's entertaining. It's interesting, but if I had a choice between purchasing that piece of art in purchasing a great Van Gogh,
Yeah.
I would definitely purchase the great Van Gogh because it's
Yes.
basically much better art.
It
The,
is.
the thing is, it's a bit like I still like new albums that come out by various
Yeah.
bands and acts,
Yeah.
but are they as good as a classic Rolling Stones album? Probably not. It's the same
That's
sort of
right.
thing. So you can enjoy it and take it seriously to a degree,
Yeah.
but I think the idea that this is great art, which will still be enjoyed or appreciated and taken seriously in 500 years' time or
Mm.
even 100 years' time, I think is
Ain't gonna
fanciful.
happen.
I
It's
think
not.
a lot of it will be footnotes in the history of
Yes.
art, and
Yeah.
and
And
won't
yet,
mean
it's a Turner Prize winner, which
well, yeah, but all prizes are about fashion, aren't they? Whatever happens to be fashionable that year, or whatever the judges think is going to be fashionable next year, is what they make. It's what wins. So you can't go by prizes.
I get that, and art does go in and out of fashion. And as I say, I'm genuinely glad that I went to see it and spent my afternoon watching a light going on and off. And that, I won't get that time back, but I didn't mind spending it that way. The fact that I, in
It's
many
also
ways, got more pleasure
yeah.
walking through the Valley Gardens later on that afternoon,
Well,
admiring nature's beauty.
I don't agree because if you just switch your brain off and walk in the Mercer Gallery, which is
Yeah.
it's a bit of an old-fashioned place. And, it goes back to about 1790s, its
Mm.
origins.
Mm.
The team at Mercer Gallery, a publicly owned gallery in Harrogate,
Mm.
who've brought this exhibition to Harrogate should be commended because it makes the gallery look brand new and modern and
Yeah.
of today. And it's
That's
also easy on the eye. So if you
mm.
walk in and switch your brain off and just take it
Yeah.
as a gigantic piece of eye candy, I think it's really good.
I mean, when we talked about it before, we did say actually it's really important that does happen with a gallery like the Mercer Art Gallery, that it embraces art that is at the cutting edge. And I think that point of view, it's successful. And actually, again, if it draws more people to go into galleries in Harrogate, I'm all in favour of that as well. How you then react to it, fine, But the fact that it can draw people in, and unquestionably it can do that, is a positive. I absolutely agree on that. Now, Graham, I noticed that you've had a return to your music talks, vinyl sessions, this time in a fundraiser for the Harrogate Hospital charity, and you were looking at theories about the end of the Beatles in 1969-70, which we do kind of wonder whether they, our favourite book writer on the Beatles, I can't remember his name now, but you'll know who I mean, whether he'll actually ever get to 1969-70.
Well, no, he's not even done 62 to 66 yet.
Exactly.
He's been working on it for about a decade. So I don't know if he'll ever get to 69.
So the good thing is, Graham, you've given your theories on 1969-70.
Well, Vinyl Sessions has been going on and off for about 4 years. It had a bit of a break during COVID because it didn't really work on Zoom. So
No.
last Wednesday in Harrogate with the first Vinyl Sessions in person live since about February 2020.
Yeah.
And we're doing the Beatles Abbey Road just as a sort of safe choice.
Yeah.
And it was good. I mean, the thing is, we were using old hi-fi equipment, partly lent by Ken Scott, the great producer engineer,
Oh, yeah.
who was involved with the Beatles and David Bowie and Supertramp, etc., and Elton John, etc., etc. And we'd already done a final sessions with Ken Scott about Ziggy Stardust when he turned up in person.
Yeah.
And we did one where we did one in Hamsway in the Village Hall with about 300 people in the audience.
Yeah.
Where I interviewed him about the White Album. We played tracks from the White Album.
Mm.
So we've got a pedigree. We're not just like a bunch of music fans
no.
raising money for Harrogate Hospital charity, which is called the
So
Friends of Harrogate
where did you
Hospital.
hold it this time, Graham?
Well, the organizer Colin Payne and the Friends of Harrogate Hospital charity picked Hortic Cafe, which is a marvelous new building. It's not really a rock and roll place, but it's a very good facility. And so I thought I'd make it a bit rock and roll. So introducing my talk about Abbey Road, I decided to wear my my finest Beatles T-shirt, but underneath my 70s leather jacket, my 60s psychedelic shirt, and my 70s very, very colourful, tacky, large tie. And I thought, as a joke, I'm going to just say that I'm feeling a bit hot. I'm just going to take my jacket off. Then I'm just going to take my tie off. I'm just going to take my shirt off. And then lo and behold, when I take my shirt off, I've got the Beatles T-shirt. Hilarious, I thought. So it got
there was a time, Graham, when you'd walk through the Valley Gardens naked, but we don't necessarily need to revisit those days.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, and that was under the influence of alcohol. But anyway, when I got to the actual event itself on Wednesday,
Yeah.
it actually was very hot, and I really was
Mm.
waiting. So when I pulled my stunt, it was like a great relief because I was sweating like something terrible. And I think it got a mild laugh, not a great laugh, before I
In
started
terms
on
of,
about the actual.
I mean, theories on the edge of the Beatles. I mean, people used to obviously say, rather lazily, they'd say Yoko, and then they'd just talk about disintegration of relationships. Then they'd talk about finance and that side of it. And then ultimately, Paul McCartney decided to call time. So, did you come up with any new theories on it?
Well, yeah, the thing is, by reading Mark Lewison's books, various books he's done the Beatles,
Mm.
and by following the timeline of when tracks were recorded and what the Beatles were up to in 1969 and then in the early 1970, and the conclusion that I come from was that the split up was by no means inevitable. It had reasons that existed, but it didn't have to happen, and it wasn't guaranteed to happen. And in fact, the Beatles themselves didn't think it was going to happen. And so, for example, there's always been this myth that the Abbey Road was like the Beatles coming back together again after the mess of Get Back, Let It Be filming sessions, and George Martin was there, and the four of them were there together, determined to make a great album because they sort of knew it was going to be the last album together. But none of that's true because, in fact, once the Get Back, Let It Be filming sessions finished, the Beatles kept on recording, and they kept on recording right through 1969.
Yes.
And they recorded in different studios, Olympic, Trident, and Abbey Road. They recorded with different producers, not just George Martin, but anybody they fancied having at the time. And 5 of the tracks that are in Abbey Road were actually recorded before the Abbey Road sessions began. Because officially it all began in July with George Martin before them. But in fact, if you read all the facts and what actually happened, 5 tracks were recorded before the Abbey Road sessions began. And the Abbey Road sessions themselves, John Lennon wasn't there half the time. And quite a few tracks were just Paul, George, and Ringo. And John would come in and maybe do a bit, or he might not come in. And so it was all a lot more loose than the accepted stories say about the Beatles. And it suggests that they didn't need to split up because they already adopted a new way of being a band. They came together to do Beatles stuff, but not necessarily the 4 of them at the same time.
No.
They're already all doing solo albums and
That's
solo
the key.
recordings.
They were all doing
in
solo
69,
work, weren't they?
In 69 already. So the whole thing was already in a sort of like post-Beatles phase that was actually working productively. But what got in the way eventually was Alan Klein and John Lennon's complete besotted nature.
Yes.
With the relationship with Alan Klein, which eventually cheesed Paul McCartney off enough for Paul McCartney to actually say that he wasn't working with the Beatles anymore.
Yeah.
So it could have rumbled on. And so it was quite an interesting discussion.
Did anyone offer any other theories during it? Did anyone in the audience have any thoughts on it?
Well, no, because it's a mixed bag of people in the audience. There's some people there because they support the charity. There's some there who like music in general but aren't Beatles fans. There's some there who are massive Beatles fans and fans of Abbey Road. And then there's some there's like Dave King, an old DJ, was there, and Colin Payne himself used to be a DJ in the 1980s. And Colin sort of comes across a bit like a Radio 1 DJ from the late 1980s anyway. And so it's a real mixed bag of people. And I think by far I take it the most seriously. So I don't think anybody would take me on when it came to, theorizing about the Beatles, because no one bothers to read as many books as I do.
Graham, I mean, and I get that thing that they didn't need to split. I actually still think there's something very complete about extraordinary transformations in a decade of music. I actually don't. In retrospect, I think these things, can come to an end. They're so remarkable, the changes they made in that time, and in some ways, they were left with further possibilities that were never explored. And except, obviously, they went on to make individual albums. I don't have a problem with that. I would have hated a decline to have happened. And I'm not saying that decline would have happened, but I kind of like the fact that so many bands end up in decline. That didn't happen with the Beatles.
No, it's the perfect story for that reason. So you're right. If they kept on going, which I think they could have done, I think they would have kept on doing good albums for a good 2 or 3 years after they split up. But once the world changed, the world started to change towards punk, like 75, 76.
Yeah, yeah.
Things were moving on from the 60s. And I'm not sure what the Beatles would have done then, because they were never a band just to chuck out any old tunes.
No.
They took their work really seriously. So I'm not sure what direction they could have possibly picked once the Sex Pistols and the Clash came along. So you're probably right. It was
I
probably
mean, there was a changing of the guard. The fact that it was a new decade that was happening. Again, the dawning of a new decade. For me, therefore, it feels like there was completeness that took place.
I think you're right, Charles.
Now, Graham, I'm very keen for an early interruption because it says here, interruption at this time, and there's always time for an interruption when it's on the theme of Eurovision and the Rolling Stones. Now, it could be that these are two separate stories, or it could be that you're somehow linking Eurovision and the Rolling Stones.
Well, yeah, the Rolling Stones never took part in Eurovision because it's pointless.
I think we know that.
the only surprise this year's Eurovision was that everybody thought Eurovision was really good. And then when Britain came second last, I think that sort of like mania is going to fade again, because the end of the Eurovision was rubbish at the beginning and always has been rubbish. And everybody knows that. And just because Sam Ryder was supremely good last year and came second, although he should have won really, doesn't alter the fact the competition as a whole can only be enjoyed with an ironic sense or a sense of camp, because it is a right bunch of trash. Let's face it, always was done, always was.
That was reaffirmed by the song from Finland, and an absolutely hideous piece of music, and yet within the hall, in the Liverpool hall, that they absolutely loved it, and it's partly about spectacle of performance and not quality of song. Although the winning song will have life beyond Eurovision, but overall, it is one of those things that's now hyperventilating. The presenters get so overexcited, so carried away, and as ever, you have too many presenters. Not all of whom were needed. Why so many presenters?
It's sort of presented like the Hunger Games without the violence.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was noticeable that when Britain came second last, it was pretty predictable because, I mean, first of all, she's called May Mueller. I mean, that's a German name.
German name, yeah.
Yeah, and Germany finished bottom, by the way. So
not for the first time, Germany had an absolute stinker of a night, Graham.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the name itself was like a bad start, and then the song. Good grief! I mean, a song about writing a song to get back at some boyfriend who behaved really badly, called "I Wrote a Song." That's never going to win Eurovision. No. Eurovision doesn't do subtlety or postmodernism or cleverness. It's about
Lily Allen and Amy Winehouse have already written masterpieces on that very theme. Without saying I wrote a song about it. They did write a song about it, but actually they didn't tell you they'd written a song about it.
So it was almost like the British entry was designed to impress British people, but it was a Eurovision contest. It wasn't a British contest.
No.
So they just got it totally wrong. I mean, after the thing about Sam Ryder was that he didn't even look British. He looked like a Viking. He was a very smiley, happy, positive Viking, and that's why he won. So we sort of learned nothing from our success last year.
No.
And as a result, the whole thing's turned into a farce once again.
And maybe that's the way forward. It was a flukish year last year, and a kind of one-off because he had something about him that was bigger than the event. Well, I say that, of course, the bigger than the event was the Ukraine story last year, but there was something about Sam Ryder, which is, once in a generation on Eurovision, you have someone that has that sheer personality that absolutely suits. Now, Graham, though, I can't see a connection between Eurovision and the Rolling Stones. So where does the Rolling Stones fit into your story?
If the Rolling Stones never representing Britain, say they were doing Honky Tonk Woman or Brown Sugar, they wouldn't have won.
No.
Because it's not the sort of thing that wins. So Eurovision is a world has its own rules and its own ethos, its own culture. And that ethos, culture, and rules doesn't usually include a good song. I mean, it does occasionally. There have been some good songs on it, but not that many.
There is one bit of pleasing symmetry though. 50 years after Waterloo, not the war obviously, but 50 years after ABBA's Waterloo, the event will be held in Sweden, And that's significant in its own way. So there's a nice bit of symmetry there. But I don't want to be too serious about Eurovision, because really, what's the point of being serious about it? It doesn't want serious analysis. It just doesn't.
But interestingly, Charles, Ireland were knocked out in the semi-finals.
They were.
But if they picked John Lydon of Public Image Limited song, perhaps they would have made the final, because he would have been unusual. If John Lydon had appeared in Eurovision, he would have stood like a sore thumb, and he might have actually.
It was we said at the time, when we discussed it at the time, that it was a missed opportunity on Ireland's part to go conventional rather than actually thinking left field on this. So anyway, there's the world of Eurovision, which is put away for another year before humiliation of yet another British singer. We look forward to that. Now, you this week have been to see the David Brewis Orchestra in Leeds, which I think was at the Howard Assembly Room.
That's right.
And promoting David's new album, The Soft Struggles, in the same week, incidentally, that Ron Sexsmith played his rearranged gig at Howard Assembly Room. So something of a cracking good week at the Howard Assembly Room this week. So you, David Brewis, you know him well, and you've championed field music for a long time, Graham. But I think it's always interesting when a musician finds a new way to express themselves, and the reason behind that, and also if it maybe changes the way they perform a concert as well. So that's what I'm most interested to hear. They're very engaging, the two brothers. We know that when they perform together. But if the focus here on the David Brewis Orchestra, what more did it bring out of David, if you like, in this configuration?
The interesting thing is, this is one of the best things that the Brewis brothers have ever done, and one of the best things field music ever done, because it really works. And I bumped into David before the show, I think it's about 7 o'clock. So had a chat, and I said to him, like, I can't believe I'm going to see some real jazz flute in action on stage. I said, the last time I saw that was in the Anchorman with Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
He must have been nervous because he didn't laugh. And then he explained to me that he was nervous partly because some of the members of the 10-piece orchestra that he'd organised for the live show, the live version of the Soft Struggles, were actual proper good jazz players. And obviously, the Brewis brothers, who are really talented, aren't jazz guys. So he was slightly nervous that he was about to attempt something that involved a style of music that he himself wasn't, absolute expert in. And bizarrely, it completely worked. You had he did most of the vocals, but you also had Eve Cole doing a bit of the vocals as well. You had Sarah Hayes of Admiral Fallow playing flute and piano. You had Faye McCalman on sax, John Pope on sax, his brother Peter Brewis on drums. And the album itself, on record, is only 33 minutes. It's like a perfect bit of sort of acoustic strings and sax and flute, jazz pop with occasional bits of bossa nova, occasional bits of Bacharach, and a little bit of that sort of like Van Morrison soul from Astral Weeks. Yeah, and it works. It works a treat because the quality of songwriting is superb, and it's arranged to within an inch of its life. It's like so neat and tidy and perfect. And when they were going to do it live, I thought, how would they be able to do this live? Because the Brewses are quite lively guys on stage. Usually, they're quite funny, very engaging. They don't sit back. No. And for this album, when they played it live, they really had to sit back to make it work musically. And boy, did it work! They reproduced the sound and the feel absolutely perfectly. And whereas when I saw field music at the Barbican in 2018, when they had a string section, a bit of brass section, when they're trying to augment the band and try and be a bit more musically ambitious, it didn't really add anything to the band, because the band's, when they play, the actual musical sounds quite dry, quite percussive, not really bass led. And when they chopped on strings and brass live, it didn't really, I don't think it didn't gel totally. It was all right, but it didn't really bring anything new at the table. Whereas live, this really worked. The Brewses playing live with a proper orchestra with great little songs.
Was this, Graham, the first time that they'd done this, or
I think they'd only done one gig before. They're not doing an extensive tour with it.
No.
I think they're only playing 4 gigs altogether, including one in London. But yeah, so I think they've done one gig before, and it was just really impressive, just absolutely flawlessly performed. And the songs seemed even better live than on the record, so it was really good.
That's always what you want anyway. But I admire musicians who, we talked about James doing their orchestral and gospel choir performance in York Barbican and the tour that's ended up in Manchester, and again finding new ways to express themselves. And the Brewis brothers, I mean, they stretch possibilities with field music's music anyway, but to find another way to do that, as David has done, that seems to me to be the whole point of live music anyway, is not just to replicate immaculately an album, but to express themselves in a way that without performing live, you will never know the full possibilities of the songs. That, of course, is partly in the tradition of jazz music anyway, to find the new possibilities, the new nuances that are there, to take it even to unexpected places. But for an audience, I think that's an interesting experience as well, to not quite know what's going to be coming, and to see how musicians perform together, meld together, how they react to playing together for what sounds like a rare time that they've done that.
Yeah, well, the interesting about field music and the David Brewis Orchestra and the Soft Struggles album is that they've always been quite an art rock band and quite modern. But when you see them live, the reason it wasn't just them copying things before, it wasn't just them trying to be, Van Morrison or Nick Drake or whatever, was because at the heart of field music, no matter how modern they are, is a slight Edwardian drawing room feel. There's something very front parlour about them that I can't quite explain. And they don't really come from that sort of background because they're from Sunderland. But there's something very inside, in a room, in a smallish room, but in a very civilized, tidy, smallish room about them. And that was underneath all the songs on the Soft Struggles album, which kept it from being some sort of tribute to music of the past. It was still authentically them.
That makes Howard Assembly Room a really good place for them to play, because it aptly suits what you're describing as a performance space. So that was a really canny decision on their part.
It really worked.
It's one of those venues that if listeners have never been there, it is well worth experiencing, because it takes music very seriously. But it's not po-faced. But you can see musicians loving playing in that space. It's a little unusual in the design. It looks like a lot of lollipop sticks stuck together, which is a kind of wooden frame within which the performances take place. But also you can see it both on the ground level, but you can equally go up onto the mezzanine level. And I tend to try and watch from above. But it has a magic about it, and the acoustic there, as you would expect with anything that's connected with the Opera North organization, is absolutely vital to it. And I've seen concerts there where it has utterly been able to express as best as possible the musicality of performers, because the acoustic is just right.
You're totally right, Charles. The acoustics are superb. And it's also got a very good bar.
That is very true. And of course, they've been doing bits of the Leeds Grand Theatre building up, and indeed in particular the Opera North input, including restaurant facility as well. It's a very, very high-grade Leeds performance space now, the Leeds Grand Theatre, and now the extension. Howard Assembly Room had already opened, but a lot of money has been put into this by Opera North, and it really, really is beneficial.
Leeds needs it, because Manchester's, in terms of its reputation, is streets ahead of Leeds.
It is, and yet, Graham.
And now Liverpool, because of Eurovision, so is Liverpool.
Yes,
Liverpool is heavily monetising its cultural history and heritage in a way that Leeds still isn't doing. Leeds is still behind those two cities, even though in theory,
what about? I mean, I haven't been to anything at City of Culture or their version of Leeds City of Culture, because they didn't win City of Culture. Is that a chance for better momentum for that? I mean, we've seen Leeds Playhouse being redeveloped. We have seen the college that's opened alongside, the buildings within Leeds, the universities, likewise, the facilities at the universities have improved hugely, as they have indeed in York as well. So does Leeds need to go more on the front foot, do you think, Graham?
Well, it's been putting a lot of efforts. There's a lot of festivals now in Leeds, and there's an awful lot of great facilities, and there's a lot of great things happening. But it's still, Leeds in itself doesn't like to boast about itself.
No, it's not its nature, is it?
Yeah, until it learns to boast about its own assets, it'll always be third to Manchester, Liverpool. It really needs to it needs a strategy and a campaign to make Leeds itself take itself seriously as an arts and cultural place. It's all a bit too much like we don't want to stand out too much or look like we're pretentious still.
That absolutely sums it up. There's a braggadocio about Liverpool and about Manchester that Leeds never has. That swagger that Leeds is more of a shrugged shoulder of a city than that. And maybe that's a contrast, and in some ways I like that about the city of Leeds. But the reality is, it is hugely competitive out there. Like Harrogate has to compete now in a very competitive market for conferences, and has to really push itself in that way. Leeds needs to do the same. We've seen its shopping facilities become absolutely tremendous top level. But you're right that the culture actually is. There's plenty going on in the city, but it doesn't. I mean, even something like Slung Low. How many people know about the wonderful work that's done by Slung Low? And that's nothing, because Alan Lane he is a good self-publicist, but that's the kind of places beyond Leeds should know about.
The trouble is that as a Scotsman, I've got no problem with Alex, a Scotsman. But if you want to sell things or get a reputation or get more visitors and get more, more respect nationwide, you're gonna have to like get a bit better at talk about themselves.
Absolutely. Well, now, Graham, this week I went to see a musical called Heathers the Musical. With I was probably around about the oldest person in the audience, I think, and that's a sign of the times on much as anything. But that's partly because this is a musical that's playing to teenage audience who absolutely adore the show, early 20s audience. There are some mums in the audience as well, and the odd stray man like myself that was there. And it goes against this current context where people are very much worrying about behavior that is happening at musicals. But this was a show where the addiction to this show, or the love of this show, was not going to let anything like that get in the way of it. Now, maybe it's because it's not a drinking crowd, which is becoming the new problem that theatres are facing. It has, as with Six the Musical, it's a young audience that's got an absolute passion for the songs, for the characters. It's got a kind of cult following in the way that.
So what's Heathers about?
Say again, what it's about? Well, so the story, if you remember the film, do you remember the film with Winona Ryder?
Is it based on the film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is exactly that story, with the three Heathers with their croquet mallets, with the Veronica Sawyer character who becomes part of that group, but actually retains some form of individuality, but then falls under the spell of JD, the outsider dressed in black. And of course, when you look at the themes that are being discussed: bulimia, bullying, body dysmorphia, sexual violence, shootings, suicide. This is all from a 1989 film that actually has become more resonant than ever as a musical now.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.